Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Marianne Monteleone, and welcome to LIBOR's Wednesday webinar. We have a very, very special guest back with us today, Dr. Lawrence Yun, Chief Economist for the National Association of Realtors. So hoping that you've taken the time to be with this this gorgeous summer Wednesday to hear this special guest, Dr. Yun, and we want to welcome him. Welcome and thank you for coming back with us, Dr. Yun.
Thank you, Marianne, for inviting me. I think it was 6 months ago when I last gave the update.
Yes.
So, towards the end of the year in 2021, where things were completely surprising in positive way. In the midst of a pandemic, high unemployment rate condition, the housing market really took off. It brings new set of challenges, as everyone knows. If you are representing sellers, all right, you are going to get that deal done within a week, 2 or 3. But if you are a buyer agent, you are crossing your finger, hoping that you get selected, because if you don't, you have to start the process all over again, another headache part. So thank you for inviting. And let me put the PowerPoint slide onto the screen so better explain.
We'll get right into it. Thank you so much. Okay.
Hold 1 second. I'm getting a little dry throat, so I'm going to get a bottle of water and come back.
Yes, go ahead, and I'll introduce you properly while you do that. 6 months ago, as Dr. Yun said, we had him as a speaker, and we booked him back then for 6 months out to find out and take a look at the housing market for 2021, the second half of the year, and what it will look like in 2022. And we were just saying before opening up to all of the members to join in how fast the 6 months has gone, what the housing market looks like. He has great information to share, and we're happy that he's with us and back with us today. So let me properly introduce him and we'll get the webinar started. Lawrence Yun is Chief Economist and oversees the research group at the National Association of Realtors. He supervises and is responsible for a wide range of research activity for the association, including NAR's existing home sales statistics, affordability index, and home buyers and sellers profile report. He regularly provides commentary on real estate market trends for its 1.4 million realtors. Dr. Yun creates NAR's forecasts and participates in many economic forecasting panels, among them the Blue Chip Council and the Wall Street Journal Forecasting Survey. He appears regularly on financial news outlets, is a frequent speaker at real estate conferences throughout the United States, and has testified before Congress. He also participates in the Industrial Economics Discussion Group at the Joint Center for Housing Studies of Harvard University. He has appeared as a guest on C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Dr. Yun received his undergraduate degree from Purdue University and earned his PhD from the University of Maryland at College Park. So we thank you and we welcome you from LIBOR. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Marianne. I hope everyone is doing well. Certainly the business condition is one of the unusual with so many buyers and not enough supply. Conditions, what you can anticipate for the remainder of the year and going into 2022. One question that I get frequently is, when will the market calm down? In a sense, market has actually made some turn in the market from the super frenzy to now normal frenzy, if I can use that comparison. Or maybe you are driving 90 miles per hour, way above the speed limit. Now you are coming back down to maybe 75 miles per hour, still going at a very high speed, but not the super high speed. Let me put some data point onto the screen, and I think that's a better way to illustrate the data points. So let's go here. All right. So this is the home sales across the country, and many markets, including the Long Island region, is following some similar pattern. The red line, essentially, you can view it as pre-pandemic conditions. And what you see is that during the lockdown, it went down, and we were really unsure how far it will go down and when it will recover. But once the economy was reopened, consumers were eyeballing record low mortgage rates, falling mortgage rates, and also some degree of wanting to get away from the city, getting away from Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens into more, I should say, less densely populated areas. Maybe there was a concern, the COVID spread more frequently in a high dense area. And also, we saw some social unrest. I think, the bringing the issue of racial justice, I think that's to the forefront is very important, but nonetheless, no one likes crime and looting and the breaking of the windows and some concern related to that. But the home sales, as you can see, went way beyond the pre-pandemic conditions and quite quickly. But you see that the condition is now beginning to calm down a bit. It used to be about 20% above 1 year ago level or 20% above pre-pandemic, but now it's only about 10% above pre-pandemic. So still doing better, it's still exceptional performance, but you see some topping out patterns. Also, another data point is the mortgage application to buy a home. Most people take out a mortgage. I know in some cases it's all cash, but most consumers take out a mortgage. And how many people are taking out mortgage? Again, using red line as a reference point for pre-pandemic, it went down during the lockdown, it came back up. But note that now it is sliding down below the pre-pandemic. Home sales are still above pre-pandemic, but mortgage application is coming down. Part of it is just normal statistical error in some of the measurement, but also we have the increasing incidence of all cash buyers. Whether the strong stock market is providing the financial wherewithal, or it's possible that people are borrowing money from family members and others temporarily to make an all cash offer in this very competitive market. And then once the home is closed, then they try to perhaps get a mortgage, like, cash out refinance and others. But right now in a very competitive environment, people are trying to come up with cash to make the offer stand out a little more. Home sales not clicking along, so are the buyers retreating from the marketplace? Perhaps because of the record high home prices. But I would say the bigger reason as to why the home sales are showing some top out pattern is this graph. Record low inventory, just simply not enough supply. So if there is only 3 homes for sale in your neighborhood, there can only be 3 home sales, not 4. So the low inventory level is preventing home sales from clicking along, even though there are plenty of buyers. Also, use this graph for anyone who is concerned about the housing market bubble. That is one of the most searched phrases in the Google search engine. Are we in a housing market bubble? Show this graph. Back when the home prices were falling in 2007, 2008, you see that inventory levels were 4 times above what it is today. Today, record low inventory in a supply constrained market, home prices simply do not decline. Now, I hope the home price growth begins to moderate, because we cannot have a situation where home prices are rising 15%, 20%. Consistently, it will simply squeeze out first-time buyers, and there will be very little business opportunity. So we need to assure that home prices moderate, and the only way to do that is to bring more inventory to the marketplace. If we look at the price category as to where the inventories are falling the most, This chart clearly illustrates it is on the starter home market. Low price points is where the inventories are most acute shortage conditions. While on the upper end, say $1 million plus, we actually have more inventory. And if we compare what the sales are occurring and sales are not occurring, we see similar pattern. Where there is essentially no inventory, sales are down from 1 year ago. Where there is inventory declines of moderate proportion, sales are still above. And on $1 million plus, sales are essentially doubling from 1 year ago because inventory is not really a concern on $1 million plus homes. So more inventory, we can anticipate more closing, more deals getting done, and certainly more consumers happy that they have become homeowners. But right now, we don't have inventory. So why do we have this housing shortage? And by the way, when I say housing shortage, it is not only about home buying. We are also beginning to face rental shortage. I know there is plenty for apartment for rents in, say, Brooklyn and Queens, as the market is slowly beginning to recover. And New York City was, one of the unique circumstances where people really fled out of the city. So the rental market in Queens and Brooklyn are steadily recovering. But once you go out of the city and clearly rest of the country, there's an apartment shortage. So the rents are beginning to rise strongly. So we have housing shortage, and this chart shows why. This is new home construction, both apartments and single family homes. And what you see is that in some years, it is above average, other years it's below. But if you look at what has happened from 2007 onwards, we have been under historical average by large magnitude for multiple consecutive years. And that is why we have a housing shortage. And that is why home prices will not decline, given that we have a housing shortage. The final two red bars that you see, that is simply my forecast for 2021 and 2022. I think the momentum for the builders are to build more homes. So finally, we will go above historical average, but that is still insufficient to close the gap in housing shortage. But at least we are moving in the right direction. And this is one of the reasons as to why I believe the market will calm down as we proceed through the remainder of the year. More inventory beginning to show up, which means possibly less prevalence of multiple offers. Or maybe the multiple offers will still stay with us, but rather than seeing 10 offers, people begin to see only 2 or 3 offers. So less competitive condition as we proceed through the years and as we go into next year, 2022. In the meantime, mortgage rates are holding steady. That is the red line, mortgage rates. You see how it was declining throughout 2020, and that is the impetus for boost to home sales. Then from January, we saw mortgage rate begin to rise before holding steady. So why is the mortgage rate beginning to show a little upturn? Well, the green line that you see is from Washington, D.C., Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve is all in maximum monetary liquidity policy. They're saying, look, interest rates are essentially at zero with the bank-to-bank lending condition, which influences the mortgage rates. But the middle blue line is beginning to rise. So what is the middle blue line? Middle blue line is the US government borrowing rate. All this fiscal stimulus, unemployment supplements, these are not free lunch. This is rising budget deficit. So when the government budget deficit rises, some of the people who are lending the money to the US government is saying, look, I need a little higher interest rate because I'm not sure that you are in a good condition with continuing high debt, national debt and rising budget deficit. You have to charge me, you have to give me slightly higher interest rates. So that's slight uptick. And that's why the mortgage rates are rising. And I would say by end of the year, don't be surprised if the mortgage rate actually rises to 3.5% on average, 3.5% by end of the year from current 3%, because we have the rising budget deficit, but also we have the consumer price inflation beginning to go way up. If people remember the 1970s, I know many new realtors, they have no memories of the 1970s. But in the 1970s, mortgage rates were 12%, 14%, and at one point, 18%. So why were the mortgage rates so high in the 1970s? Because inflation was high. Inflation was running 10%, 11%, very high inflation. So when a bank lends the money, or you can even say a loan shark is lending the money, and the money that is returned later would have lost value because of the inflation. And only way to compensate for that is to charge higher interest rates. So another as to why I believe mortgage rate will tick higher by end of the year is because inflation is popping out. And as you can see, inflation was at maximum 2%, but now it's reaching 5%. Part of it is stimulus package, but the economy and the vaccination progress is making a strong progress, which is leading to a very robust economic activity. This is also another element of the price increases, which interestingly is not part of the consumer price inflation. So the median price in the Nassau, Suffolk County, as you can see, has risen to an all-time high. Just 10 years ago, people could have picked up a property for about 400,000, but now it has surpassed 600,000. It's certainly in Brooklyn and Queens, prices are higher, being closer to the city, but the trend overall would have been very similar condition. And typical wealth that was gained because of the price increases is generally on the pricier markets like San Francisco, San Diego. But if you look, New York is pretty much right in the middle of the pack. So for a typical New Yorker, which covers the suburbs, Long Island, Connecticut, New Jersey, you cover all this metropolitan area of New York City, a typical homeowner gained $60,000 last year simply by being a homeowner. So this is quite a nice sum in terms of being a homeowner. There's more inflationary pressure for the future because the producer prices are also rising. This is just for the construction material, things like lumber, cement, the wood panel, all that part is rising, which means that at least the home prices, the new construction, they need to pass on this higher production cost over to the consumers. Let's go to the rental market because roughly about 40% of the realtors have a second home, typically an investment property, going into a business where people are very familiar with. And the rents actually decelerated during the pandemic months. So rents were rising 4% a year before the pandemic, then it declined. For some of you who have a tenant who is not paying rent, please apply because you can get that rental subsidy. The eviction moratorium, led to the condition where you cannot kick the tenants who are not paying the rents out of the home, but the rental subsidy is available. Tenants should be applying for that, but some of the tenants may be lazy, they're not applying, but then the housing provider can also apply. So please contact New York State Housing Agency to see what you can recover related to the eviction moratorium and some tenants who are not paying rents. But the rents will quickly go back up to 4%. And what I am hearing from some fellow economists in the New York City area, they are saying rents are rising close to 7-8% in the new lease that is being signed. And here's why. The number of the rental households are beginning to pop much higher. The renter households greatly declined in the second quarter of last year when we had the lockdown. Many workers in the restaurant industry, many workers in the hotel, essentially they lost job and they went to their parents, went straight to the basement. Excuse me for a second. So the rental demand collapsed. But now with the economy reopened, restaurants getting busier, hotels seeing increased occupancy, the demand for jobs are recovering and also demand for rentals. So if the rental demand is recovering, it's almost guaranteed that these rents will also go back up to about 4% growth rate as it happened before the pandemic. Let me now turn to the job market. This is the US job market condition. So what I put here is from year 2000 onwards. So right before the pandemic, America had the most job ever. Then in a single month, we lost 10 years of progress. But now it's beginning to recover, but we are not back up to the pre-pandemic condition. Red line is a reference point for year 2000, and also in 2010 during the foreclosure crisis, and also during the lockdown. So this is the US figure. Let's look at the local market, Nassau, Suffolk County only. So the job market was consistently above the red line, consistently above the year 2000 mark until the lockdown hit. And once the lockdown hit, you went way under because New York State had a very strict lockdown. Governor Cuomo said, no, you cannot reopen the business. And this clearly hurt the New York State economy. So it went way down. Again, for a comparison, this is the US. US never went below the red line. But you see that in Nassau, Suffolk, you went way down because of the stricter lockdown. But now you are climbing out, but not back up to the prior peak condition. Let's look at the New York City area, which is 4 times larger than just Nassau, Suffolk County. So this is just the New York City, not the suburbs. So you see that even with the lockdown, surprisingly, it did not go below the red line. And the reasoning is that 10 years prior, New York City had one of the fastest job creating market conditions. So the lift that occurred before the pandemic was very strong. Then once the pandemic hit, all that job was lost, but the New York City never went down below the red line. But now the jobs are recovering. But note that job recovery is less than half of the job losses, meaning that it's a slower job recovery compared to the rest of the country. A better illustration is the unemployment rate really shot up in the early months of the pandemic. But now, as you can see, unemployment rate is beginning to steady, but it is still above the pre-pandemic condition. Here's an interesting teenager unemployment rate. So it looks very similar. Only area of difference is look at the current unemployment rate, 10% unemployment, versus what it was before the pandemic. Before the pandemic, unemployment rate for teenagers were only 15%. So teenager population actually has more people working compared to the general population. So the general population unemployment rate is still above pre-pandemic, but the teenagers are below. So why could this be the case? Teenagers, they don't qualify for unemployment insurance. So if the jobs are available, they're beginning to offer higher wages, teenagers are going out and seeking unemployment, while for the general population, at least some unemployment benefit is still better than, say, working as a cashier at a Macy's in other conditions. So that has slowed the recovery in some of the job market. This is a comparison across 50 states. New York State down 8.6%, meaning total jobs are down 8.6% now compared to before the pandemic, and one of the largest declines in the country. If you look at like Florida, it is down only 4.2%. And in the case of Idaho and Utah, that orange color shape, they actually have more jobs now compared to pre-pandemic because the Idaho and Utah never closed their businesses. Businesses were always open even through the pandemic. So in a sense, by having a stricter lockdown in New York State, the economy was damaged more severely compared to other states, but at least you are moving in the right direction. So going back to the New York City jobs, as well as the suburbs, you see that jobs are beginning to come around. And given now, I think, vaccination is one of the best in New York State. So maybe you will have more robust recovery from this point onwards. Jobs recovery is not 100%, but job openings are record high. I don't know if it is the case in your area, but in my area, Washington, D.C., every time I walk the street, I see help wanted sign everywhere. In the restaurants, at a hotel, help wanted, inquire within. And some people may say, well, those are low wage industries, but right now we have a record high job openings across the country. Maybe you experienced that. You go to a restaurant, it takes a little longer to serve food than before because they simply don't have enough staffing. Let me now wrap it up with a forecast. So the forecast for housing market is that based on home sales that I've been monitoring for the first half of the year, home sales in 2021 should be about 10% above 2020. And you say, wait a minute, wasn't 2020 really good? And the answer is yes. Autumn and winter months were very good, but you missed the spring buying season last year. This year, there is spring buying season, 12 months of home sales, not just 10 months of home sales of last year. So that's why annual total in 2021 will be higher. But 2022, I think the sales will come down a bit because of continuing rising mortgage rates. Jobs are positive, but housing market is more sensitive to changes in mortgage rates. My final slide is this. Office market has still not recovered. So even though the jobs are coming back, there is a disagreement among office employment. I think JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs are saying, come back to office immediately, or by September, by Labor Day, no excuses. While other Wall Street companies, Citi, Deutsche Banks, and others are saying flexible work schedule. I'm not sure what the right model is, but this just means that commuting is less important now than before. My prediction is some kind of hybrid. Come to office 2 days a week, other 3 days work from home. If that is the case, I actually expect further away from the city, the market will be more vibrant because commuting is not important anymore. While closer to the city, I think the market will recover more slowly. The recent news that the New York City is coming back, and also possibly the election of the mayor's election were more anti-crime focused, and maybe that will revive the city. It remains to be seen. But right now, the office leasing is clearly negative, implying that work from home flexibility is probably here to stay for most office workers, which will benefit people further out from the Manhattan area. Vacation home market also rising. So, certainly Suffolk County exposure to vacation home rising. This is again, work from home can also mean work from vacation home, and hence the increase in demand. So thank you for listening. And now I am going to stop and turn it back over to Marianne. I can spend another, say, 5 minutes for question and answers.
Sure. Thank you so much. It was customized and it was positive, realistic. And we do have a question. Can you comment about the foreclosure market? Will we be getting a lot of them?
The answer is there will be some foreclosures because mortgage forbearance. So this is a program where homeowners, if they can show negative economic impact during the pandemic, they don't have to pay mortgages. But now, if they cannot find job, obviously, the banks will say, look, either you pay mortgage or we have to foreclose on a home. But I think that homeowner do not have to go through foreclosure because of the price increases. So given the price increases, homeowners simply say, look, I'm going to just do a normal sale. There's some positive housing equity. I'm going to do the cash out and I'm going to search for another home elsewhere. So I don't really anticipate massive flood of foreclosures just because home price increases. And furthermore, jobs are recovering. So people who are in that program now say, look, I have a job, I can pay the mortgage payment, no problem.
It completely makes sense. So we have another question. The 10-year dropped off last 2 days, currently at 1.331%. If the trend continues, how will that change your forecasts?
That means it's all even for the better because I am quite surprised that 10-year Treasury yield, that's the government interest rate to buy government bond, it has actually declined even with rising budget deficit and inflation popping out. Why is decline? Maybe people are saying, look at the interest rate in Europe. They are essentially offering zero. Look at Japan, they're offering zero. US Treasury, at least they're offering 1.5% interest, so I'm willing to buy. So maybe by comparison, but this is a very good in terms of mortgage rate may not increase later. Now, 10-year Treasury can suddenly move. So, my prediction is mortgage rate probably will go something closer to 3.5%. But if I am wrong and 10-year Treasury remains low, mortgage rate will be 3% during the holiday season in December. Certainly very good news for home buyers.
Mm-hmm. And I know your time is limited. I know you're doing 2 or 3 of these a day. We chatted about that. I have to tell you how grateful we are that you are here with us today and came back 6 months almost to the day. And the information that you shared back then helped us to plan moving forward. And this information certainly will. For anyone who missed it, you can hear Dr. Yoon again. He allowed us to record it at lirealtor.com/COVID. And the recording will be there within a day or so. Thank you so very much. And we wish you all the best from LIBOR. Thank you.